Moat on the volley, and back corner. What a start for West Bromwich Albion. Unbelievable! West Bromwich Albion have ruined his big day.
Line again, and it's Adam Wingy who gets the final touch, and West Bromwich Albion now have a 2-goal cushion.
The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. We're back again for another match reaction style episode of the podcast, where we'll be chatting all about Saturday's FA Cup third round defeat against Brighton and Hove Albion. We'll also be taking a look at some transfer news and much more in today's episode. But today we're once again joined by Albion correspondent for Birmingham Live and also Birmingham Mail, Joe Chapman. Joe, welcome back. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well. Thank you for having me on again.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. It's your third appearance on the show, but in case the listeners haven't heard you before, what sort of things do you do in your role at Birmingham Live and Birmingham Mail?
Yeah, I've been at Birmingham Live now for 7 years. I've covered Albion, who are my boyhood club. This is the third full season that I've been the club writer, and just day-to-day coverage of all things Albion, match day coverage, bringing you build-up, reaction, transfer news, and everything in between, round the clock, round the year.
Very good. So your first appearance on the show, is that, as we spoke about, just was back this time last year, where you said, about the January window, saying, it's always a really busy time for the football writers and the football journalists. How's it been so far?
Yeah, I mean, as a lot of Albion fans will know, it's not usual that they move so quickly in the transfer window. So it's been nice to actually have something like that to really get your teeth into. It feels like a very significant sign to hit the ground running. Obviously, where that leaves us now for the rest of the month remains to be seen. I'm envisaging it to be pretty quiet, but in the meantime, it's now kind of sifting through what comes out and basically adding layers onto the bone, and basically quite frankly, just telling the truth and what's happening, what's not happening when it comes to lanes being linked and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And last time, I think the second time, the most recent time you're on the show, we were previewing the season. It was a lot of optimism coming into it. Ishmael just been appointed, and things were starting to really look up. Obviously, in your time covering the club this season, what have you kind of made of things so far? Obviously, I think we're over halfway now. How are you feeling heading into the second half of the season? How have you felt things have gone so far?
Well, I mean, I don't think there could be too many complaints from the beginning. I thought that Albion, certainly for those first 4 or 5 weeks, were absolutely. Some of the games they were involved in were pretty breathtaking. You had all the emotions of the Peterborough game. If you go slightly before that, the way that they beat Sheffield United at home was quite stunning, really, when everybody at that time expected Sheffield United to be very much a promotion rival. It felt like a real message being sent. And then they've just lost their way away from home. And even at home, a lot has been made about teams coming and setting, 2 banks of 5 and just, putting everybody behind the ball and making it difficult for Albion. They are actually one of only 2 teams in the EFL and the Premier League to have an unbeaten home record still, along with Liverpool. So, in that sense, you'd think it'd be quite mad why they've been booed off so many times. The problem has been away from home for me. They don't score enough goals. That's quite obvious. You can go through Huddersfield, Blackpool, Barnsley, Derby, Stoke. Fulham. They just don't score enough goals away from home. That Coventry game sticks out like a sore thumb. So that's something that's hopefully been addressed with the signing of DK, but there's a lot of pressure on him, isn't there, already? You'd have to say somebody, who kind of is being made out to be the final piece of the jigsaw, when quite clearly there are other areas of Albion's overall game, that really desperately need improving.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to a bit of DK later on in the episode, I'm sure, because I'm sure Albion fans are desperate to know about makings of that move and Dike's arrival, and obviously hopefully getting a game against QPR in our next one. But the most recent fixture, Joe, was a 2-1 defeat after extra time against Brighton in the FA Cup. You were there covering the game. Obviously, a really strong lineup actually going into it. Were you kind of surprised to see Ismail play, what was near enough at the time, with suspensions, injuries, eligibility, being, near enough first 11 to face Brighton in the FA Cup?
Yeah, well, he said on the Friday before the game that he was going to be going with as strong a team as possible. Obviously, we knew that I put together a piece in the week outlining that you could actually name a starting 11 of Albion players that weren't available to him for a variety of reasons. So even though it was the strongest team he could have played, there were still probably 4 or 5 players missing that otherwise would have absolutely been in the starting 11 if he'd have, gone full strength. So, for example, Dike, I would imagine, would be considered an absolute starter. So would players like Daryl Dike, Sam Johnston, Alex Mowat. So many players that would otherwise have immediately got into that team. I actually thought for 70 minutes, I know there were a few grumblings at the end that Albion, the way they went out, and Brighton maybe just come on a bit stronger at the end because they are a Premier League team, and you just have to look at the players they brought on. I mean, the lad who scored the equaliser for them and then set up the winner, and also set up their goal that was offside as well. He just absolutely changed the game for them. He was like man of the match, and he only played, kind of 10, 15 minutes of normal time. They bring on players like Trossard, and you've Morpie's already knocking about. So they've got definitely a different quality of player that Albion do at this moment in time. That all said, I thought Albion were pretty good value for the lead, and it all just kind of went to pot really when Kipper got sent off rather stupidly. The first one he can have no complaints about. The second one, perhaps there's a bit of a debate to be had about whether the referee was a bit harsh on him but basically don't give the referee that decision to make in the first place. And the other thing I would say about that is that at that moment in time, Kipper is very fresh in his mind, in the referee's mind, because he's only just booked him, so he knows immediately that he's on a thin ice anyway. So it just kind of gave the ref a decision to make, which was needless. I thought Albion had them at arm's length, really. And as you say, I thought, considering everybody, all 8,000 people that did turn up at the game probably went there with very, very few expectations. Actually, it turned out to be a pretty entertaining game of football.
Yeah, I was one of the 8,000 that were there. It was certainly a bit upsetting, I think, a little bit to see so little people there at the Hawthorns. Obviously, usually we tend to pack in, I think, 22,000 or upwards or something like that in some of the games that I've seen so far. But what do you think the sort of reason was for the low attendance? Because that must be our lowest attendance for some years now.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it would always be a cup game, I suppose, in terms of when those attendances drop dramatically, because especially when times are hard and when it's not going to play in the league, that's when fans decide to knock cup games on the head. People will, a lot of the time, will go, as season ticket holders, will go to league games on sufferance and sit there even if they're not particularly enjoying it. And even then, this year, we've seen a few fans that have definitely, even knocked that on the head and have stopped going, even though they're full-paying customers. So that is a pretty loud message for the club, I think, in terms of, you've got to pay attention. This is the fan base that are talking with their wallets and with their feet. That's quite a stark, attendance that really kind of sent ripples around. Not just Albion, not just West Bromwich. It was, you had a lot of fans that were from other clubs saying, "What the hell's going on there?" and taking the mick. And you just thought, it was a shame. There are other things that don't help. Coronavirus doesn't help. I know a lot of fans that maybe wouldn't go to games because perhaps, you need a COVID passport and they've maybe decided not to have a jab, or they decide to not take a lateral flow test. You've got the just general apathy of the tie. It wasn't a great tie. It wasn't a great opponent. It wasn't going to, bring in thousands and thousands of people just based purely on the opposition. I know one or two people personally who went to Kiddie Harriers that were Albion fans, and probably had a slightly more enjoyable day out. and then there's the cup itself. I mean, yeah, Ishmael did say all he could do was outline on the Friday that he was going to name a strong team. He did that. A lot of fans kind of preempted it to be more like the Arsenal EFL Cup game. Do I want to pay 15 quid to watch something like that? Watch a team of kids get beat by a Premier League first team. So a lot of different factors, I think. But the style of play, where Albion are in terms of a club and their connection with the current fan base, is a very significant one.
Yeah, and it was quite difficult to sort of see that attendance and see lots of people, not attending. And, that Arsenal game proved to be a bit, in my opinion, a bit significant because, I think Ishmael may have set a bit of a precedent down there with, the sort of lineup that he might take into the FA Cup. But obviously, as you said there, I thought it was a bit strange because I saw that article and I saw, oh, maybe he's going to play a stronger team. And I thought that might entice some more people to come. But it wasn't quite the case, unfortunately. There were lots of youngsters involved still, though, Joe. There were, plenty of youngsters coming in off the bench later on in the game. I think, Caleb Taylor came on. Taylor Gardner-Hickman started in midfield. Tom Fellows came on. And then also Cleary and Ashworth making debuts. Do you think this is something that perhaps we can expect a bit more from Ishmael? Because obviously there's a few in there that haven't played in the league yet. Obviously Gardner-Hickman and Fellows we've seen recently. Do you think we can expect something a bit more of that from Ishmael throughout the season?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely not afraid at all of throwing anybody into the starting 11 if he thinks they're ready. Fellows being the most obvious example more recently in the league. Gardner-Hickman is now very much the fixture in the matchday squad now, and nobody can begrudge him that because he's already proven he can play in at least 3 different positions. I've covered a lot of 23s football this season, and there are a lot of aspects of that squad to be excited by. I think Caleb Taylor and Zach Ashworth. Zach Ashworth came on and played as a left wing back, which he can do, but I actually think he's better off playing on the left side of a back 3. So that was a slightly different role for him that he would normally play. But you got him, you got Taylor, you got Cleary, you mentioned. If you're looking like slightly older but still academy products, you've got Daryl Dike coming back into the mix very soon. You've got Josh Griffiths out on loan, who's making waves in League One again. There are and obviously DK now at 21-year-old. There are the makings, you'd have to say, of a really decent core of young players that have all been either good signings or products of the academy, which is exactly what we want to see, really. I mean, we've as a fan base, we've complained about it enough in the last 10, 15 years that managers wouldn't play young players or we're losing all the players to other teams. So you've got to celebrate them now they're coming through. You can't turn your nose up at it because another player like a Zach Ashworth or a Tom Fellows turns into a Gardner-Hickman and can prove that they are worthy of a first team place in the matchday squad between now and the end of the season and can make a difference at championship level. Then Albion have kind of benefited purely through their own hard work and not having to kind of go and spend millions of pounds on signings.
Yeah, it was. I thought Ashworth was really good. I thought he did a really good job, and especially as you said, they're playing a little bit out of position. I thought when it wasn't Taylor. I think it was when Bartley went down. I think we were, or was it when Kipre got sent off? I think we were down at the back with centre backs, and I think Livermore went and slotted in there for a few seconds. And I was thinking, why doesn't he just stick Ashworth in there and try and let him play in there and maybe reach back over? But he didn't decide to. But there were a few, different sort of players that we got to see as well. David Button in goal was an interesting one. Obviously, it was a fairly straightforward decision, I think, for Ishmael to play him in there. Sam Johnston being suspended currently. It was nice to see him sort of dust off his gloves and play quite well, to be honest, Joe. What did you make of his performance?
Yeah, I think, I'd certainly say he was one of Albie's better performing players. I agree with certain fans that might say, well, there are maybe reasons to be slightly kind of alarmed. Some of the things he does, he takes this this sweeper keeper thing quite seriously. A lot of times he made his mind up very early, quickly what he was going to do, which on the one occasion, the second half, led to him almost juggling the ball to the halfway line and got himself out of trouble. So there are aspects, certainly, sometimes where you think, okay, well, maybe if we could do without that kind of like heart palpitation. But some of his shot stopping is excellent. I don't think he's probably. I suppose what I would say is that Sam Johnston, he's a very, very good shot stopper. He's number one at the club for a reason. So Albion aren't losing anything with having David Button there. I wouldn't say he's an upgrade, but they're not losing anything on having David Button there from that perspective. I like the way he kind of makes his mind up, though. You're not. If he does make a mistake, then it's because his decision's already made. There's not going to be any lack of communication. There's not going to be any kind of uncertainty, I don't think. So I think that's the kind of thing Ishmael's looking for, because he did say a few times, certainly after the Derby game between Johnston and Kipper, there were a lot of occasions where this season, too many times, where errors have been, leading to goals, and it's been all Albion's own doing. So that might still happen again if David Button's still between the sticks, but equally, you know that he's going to be somebody who is very assured in his decision making.
Yeah, he was pretty good. I think he made the one-on-one save with Mopé was particularly good, I thought, and he was really good with his communication to the back three. I think you could, a lot of the time you could hear him shouting, and you could hear him really trying to get them in order. And obviously, as you said there, he was. If there was a tackle or a sweep to be made, really, he was first to it, or at least apart from that particular sort of seal moment where he was trying to juggle the ball over the halfway line and get himself forward. He was very good with his communication and coming out, and it might not be something that's 100% natural to him, but certainly looked like he knows what he's doing at least. And another player that came back into the side was Matt Phillips, obviously coming back from injury, playing sort of in the number 9 role, as we see him play a few times this season. And of course, in pre-season, I think he was looking like being the number 9 for the start of the season when we last spoke. What did you make of him? And obviously on his return to injury, that's some good minutes in the tank for him against Brighton.
Yeah, I thought he was very good, actually. I would almost go as far as say, I'd probably mitigate it with the idea that it's probably not saying much, but you could say that against very decent Premier League centre-halves, that was just about as good an hour as I've seen from Albion number 9 this season, really. Callum Robinson's done bits and bobs here and there, but we all know that that's not his favourite position. He's definitely somebody who's better playing off a number 9. And Jordan Hugel's obviously had his struggles. Phillips himself has not been particularly convincing in a number 9 role. I thought he played pretty well at Blackburn earlier in the season when he scored. But other than that, it's slim pickings. So for him to come back after however many weeks off with an injury, be thrown back into the number 9 role, which is not his favourite, even though we know he can play there, and to take on 2 Premier League centre halves like Shane Duffy and Dan Burn, and to give them that much to think about in the hour that he was on the pitch is, really encouraging. And I think it means, actually, if you look ahead now to QPR with DK, and DK is going to be 2 weeks into a kind of a 4-week mini pre-season. It kind of means that I'm sure it'll be in Ishmael's mind that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that DK doesn't start at QPR. Having seen that hour from Phillips on Saturday against Brighton, it might just make him think, actually, I can afford probably to kind of maybe just give DK the 20 minutes, half an hour at the end, rather than ask him to kind of be that man at the top of the game. So it'll be interesting. We'll have to see. But really encouraging from Matty Phillips, because he's somebody I think we've missed a lot in the last few weeks, certainly away from home.
Yeah, he was really good in the striker role, echoing everything you said there. He was really nice when he sort of dropped a bit deeper and kind of linked up the play, and it sort of allowed Grant and Robinson to kind of push on. And obviously we saw Grant use his pace quite well for the goal, and obviously them two linking up. But in terms of number 9s, I think it's only fair that we kind of get on to somebody that I think a lot of Albion fans are waiting for us to talk about a little bit here. One addition so far in the transfer window, 1st of January, as you said, moving very swiftly for Albion. Daryl Dike joining on a permanent deal. How do you think he's going to kind of cope with the expectation of sort of being as you said, the supposed missing piece for Albion? Because it's a big task, and as you mentioned, he's only 21 years old still. He's still a very young lad. Yeah,
I'd be slightly more anxious if I didn't know that he had months at Barnsley under his belt, where he did so well. It's a very, very different scenario. I mean, you can't really underestimate that. So, although he's got that championship experience and he's got that experience of English football, and very much like one or two other players that have come over actually in recent years, like Ako Yakuslu said it as well. Actually, when he came over, English football quite suits him, and I think DK thinks the same. He's coming over. He likes the idea. He's a real competitor. He likes the idea of being kind of in the rough and tumble, and bullying defenders. And quite clearly, he's got an eye for goal. Quite clearly, he's a very good finisher. You only have to look at some of the goals that he scored. He is 21. As I say, it's a very different scenario. I think he's coming back to a club where playoffs is a minimum requirement, rather than Barnsley, where it was very much overachieving. I don't also think you can underestimate really the impact of having fans as well. You got to bear in mind the 6 months he was at the club, he only played in front of a handful of fans, and that was right at the end of the playoffs. So it's very, very different for a 21-year-old lad from America to come over. And if you're going to partisan grounds away from home, the next few weeks, like Millwall away, in the next few weeks, Middlesbrough away, and you're going to have 20, 25,000 fans on your back as an opposing player, that's going to be something as well that you're going to have to deal with, because he's been so used to scoring in empty stadiums over here that's something we're going to kind of, I think that probably will play, into his thinking as he's preparing to hit the ground running. So hopefully we'll see. We know that he's 2 weeks into training program. He's training by himself at the moment while integrating with his teammates off the training pitch. So there's lots of work to be done. I really, really hope. I mean, if he gets an early goal, that'll be fantastic. Whether it be this week, whether it be against Peterborough, whenever. If he can hit the ground running, then that'll just give everybody a really big boost, including DK himself. And what you really want to see as well is it's not a one-man band. He's going to come over. We don't want to say to you, Daryl, we need you to score 15 goals. But if you can score 8 or 9 and, get the best out of Callum Robinson and Carlin Grant, and Grady Dingana, then that would be great.
Yeah, and were you surprised with sort of the permanent move? Because that as a fan and saw a lot of fans, it was a massive shock. I think John Percy from the Telegraph tweeted not too long before the signing was announced on that day, saying it's probably going to be a loan to buy, and I think everyone was sort of strapped in for that, and that would still be a good deal because obviously you get to have a look at him first before you sort of fork over any money. Yeah, were you surprised at the prospect of it being a permanent?
Yeah, well, it's quite bold, I've got to say, because again, I don't want to put any pressure on the lad at all, but it kind of does have to work now because the club have paid this money, 6-7 million quid. It obviously all came from Guo Shanlai and the trip over before Christmas, which is quite significant in itself. You'd have to say he's come out of nowhere, really. He knows that the club is worth absolutely nothing like what he paid for it. I'd say it's probably worth about a third of what he paid for it now, which is pretty disastrous from a business point of view. So he knows that he needs to get the club back in the Premier League. Have any chance of selling it for any sort of money that he'd be looking for? So what do? You kind of go and give the manager what he thinks he needs. So yeah, you can't really write off the last 2-3 years of silence from China, but you can do in this very moment and say, well, okay, that's one small step in the right direction, is giving the manager, a key tool, you'd have to say, in what he thinks he needs. So on a permanent basis, yes, 21-year-old, as I said earlier about the core of the squad, it builds into that, the long term, if he's going to be here till 2026. Taylor Gardner-Hickman's got a contract that long. Colin Grant's got a contract that long. So, you've got players for too often, really, in the last few years, Albion will have too many players at the end of contracts at the end of the summer, and you end up cutting 10, 15 players from a squad, which isn't really healthy. I think you do need to actually have, something to, really build around. And I think we're starting to see the foundations of that now. And DK is very, very much part of that.
Yeah, 100%. And Ishmael, I think, spoke about the planning of the transfer window and how, the days are gone of, leaving it to, hopefully the days are gone of leaving it to the last minute and getting things done. Obviously, the 1st of January was a massive shock. I think, I was speaking to my dad and he was saying, I think we probably might get him at some point in this window, whether it will be, the 30th or 31st or something like that. Do you think that this is a sign of hopefully things to come for Albion to get that business done and get that planning done well before the window starts?
Yeah, certainly hope so. I mean, that was very, very much, an anomaly, really. I mean, I think Mason Holgate was one who signed pretty much on New Year's Day as well. But, that was obviously a very easy deal to do. That deal was done before the window even opened. That would be the other obvious one that I can think of where Albion have moved so early. But, I mean, even just in the last few years, I counted however many it was the other day in a piece I did. You've got the three that arrived: Montero, Murphy, Johansson.
Yeah.
Grzycki and Peltier. Mark Wilson. In the summer of 2019, they had Austin, Diangana, Pereira, and Willock all arrived on deadline day. So, I mean, like, so much business. You're having to wait till 2-3 weeks after the window closes to really feel the benefits. Whereas with any luck, with DK, it'll be a case of, right, by the start of February, he'll be fully fit. We'll have his feet under the table. We'll be fully integrated with his teammates. And it's a win-win, really, provided he's performing on the pitch. So it's something that, especially a deal like this, it was key, really, because, as I say, if DK arrives at the end of the month, you then probably wait until the start of March for him to be fully fit. So, they really needed to get the deal done early. So that was it. It was pivotal that they did so. So at the same time, you've got to say hats off to the club, because there's plenty of criticism that you can aim at them for a variety of things over the last few years. But to move and get this guy in this early, and obviously remains to be seen whether he's, the perfect man for this team. It certainly looks like he's got all the attributes that Albion need. So from a centre forward at this moment in time. So, hopefully it'll work. Hopefully, it will be a real big success, and it will pay dividends at the fact that they've really pushed the boat out and got him on a permanent.
Yeah, definitely. I hope it's the end of the deadline day nonsense. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a good old deadline day move, because it's a bit of entertainment when it's hopefully the right one. But there's plenty of names on your list there, Joe, that perhaps weren't quite the right moves, on deadline day or any day, to be quite honest. But a new striker in. There's one striker that I don't think Albion fans are convinced is going to be the man to lead us forward this season, who's played several games so far. Jordan Hugill, he was left on the bench for the Brighton game, which I thought was a bit strange. Young prospects heading on, instead of himself. Obviously, there's been rumours of him being recalled with Norwich, and I think Ishmael says that he's had, some form of conversation with Hugill about where he stands on it. Do you think he's going to continue with Albion for the rest of the season, or do you think it's a case of him heading back to Norwich?
It's a tricky one at the moment, because I think there's a few moving parts to it. From Norwich's perspective, they've got a young lad called Adam Ider there who, when these reports came out initially, there was a suggestion that Adam Ider would be going out on loan. Jordan Hugill would then be recalled, basically, with Albion's blessing. And then Hugill could go and then replace Ider in Norwich's Premier League squad, and he could go and basically be a backup to Teemu Pukki. But Ider didn't end up at Forest. They've gone and got Keelan Davis from Aston Villa. So I think you probably still wait. I don't think they just recall him for the sake of it. I think if they're going to recall him right now, it would be with a view to loaning him out to another Championship club, which is a possibility, which I think probably is an explainer as to why Ishmael didn't bring him on a Saturday. Didn't want to cut time, because if you cut time, then that might be a kind of a negative mark against why a team might move for him. So, the fact that he's available to play in the FA Cup means that that might be a slightly more attractive option for any team looking for a centre forward. It's kind of on Norwich at the moment, really, I think, in terms of whether they want to recall him, whether Albion can sit down with him and agree that it's not quite worked, and that, we'll leave it there and we'll send Jordan back. But it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Jordan Hugill wasn't an Albion player at the end of the month. Equally, I think he knows that if he does stay, he can have extremely little chance of getting much game time now that DK's there, because we know that, as I say, even the first choice number 9 anyway. Even though he was pretty much the only viable option to Ishmael. He was going with Robinson and Phillips. So I can't see Hugo getting all too much game time. Certainly while DK's fit and hopefully firing.
Yeah, I think that might just be a little bit of music to Albion fans' ears at the moment. I think, a lot of Albion fans sort of wanting him to go back, but, he can still provide something. If DK gets injured, and he's still at the club, he's going to be of some use to Albion, definitely, in the way that he's played quite a few games this season so far. In terms of some other sort of transfer rumours and news going around at the moment, Robert Snodgrass is another player that could potentially be on his way out at the moment. Obviously, been rumours that he might be available for transfer this January. Do you think that any club are sort of going to take a gamble on him? I think is he 34 now, and he signed last January for Albion. Do you think that anybody might want to take a punt on him?
It's hard to know at the moment. I'm sure he's somebody that. Well, I'm sure all parties would kind of like to end that agreement. Really, I think Albion and Ishmael would like him gone. I think probably Snodgrass himself would probably be quite keen to move on if it meant him playing regularly elsewhere. Again, it's just a relationship that seems to have soured, and there's just Snodgrass wasn't even going to play on Saturday. I don't think, even if he'd have been fully fit. So I just can't see him putting an Albion shirt on again, to be honest. So for his own sake, I hope he gets that move, because he should be playing not Premier League football. He should be playing regular first team football at any point in the top couple of divisions still. So yeah, he's not going to play with Albion. I think if he's at the club, then I think it becomes difficult for Albion then to do any more business in the midfield area, because I think he's quite happy with Livermore, Molumby and Mowat, and he knows Taylor Gardner-Hampton can play in there. But the idea of maybe getting another left-sided midfielder in to replace Snodgrass, if Snodgrass was to leave, somebody that can maybe have, compete for a place with Mowat on the left-hand side of midfield, someone that's better suited to Ishmael's way of playing, would be the ideal scenario, I think, for Albion and Ishmael himself. But yeah, it's a domino effect of the January window, isn't it? You need a buyer. You need somebody that's willing to take Snodgrass off your hands in the first place. So they don't look like they're particularly forthcoming at this moment in time. And so for the moment in time, I suggest it's kind of as you were, really. I wouldn't expect a hell of a lot of business to be done elsewhere when it comes to Albion's matchday squad. I think there's a lot of players that Ishmael would, a lot of positions Ishmael would like to strengthen. And he's already said that the summer window is going to be absolutely massive for the club, regardless of the division they're in terms of where he wants them to be as a squad, in his ethos, his philosophy. So it's kind of what you can do, really, and not just doing business for the sake of it at this moment in time. And I know that fans will want to see deals get done. They'll, as we've just said about avoiding late deals, there probably still will be Albion fans sitting at home on deadline day, kind of hoping that the lights in the training ground are still on. But I think they're just really, really desperate to avoid that, and I can absolutely understand exactly why you would. So unless something absolutely majorly attractive comes up that really is a good fit for everybody, for the way that they play and for the dressing room, and that it's financially affordable, and Snodgrass has moved on, then they'll probably do it. But that has to be the scenario. Otherwise, I don't see Albion doing anything else.
Yeah, it certainly does look like a quieter end to the window than usual. I think there'll be Albion fans probably still waiting, myself included, on deadline day for deals. But I doubt there'll be, as you said there, too much going on. But with a little look ahead to QPR, Joe, obviously a big clash, really, a big game, potentially for Daryl Dike to come straight into. How are you feeling going into this one? What do you think that we can make of this game?
A bit of nerves, to be honest with you. It's not been the best run of form recently. I mean, go back now to they beat Coventry and Reading, but pretty much since the November international break, the form's been pretty rocky. So this is a really significant game in Albion's season. I don't think they've had too many games as this in terms of the shaker at the top of the table. If QPR win and they go above Albion are already closer to 7th than they are to 2nd as it is anyway. Fail to win here, or worst case scenario they get beat here. They've not just dropped 4th place to QPR, but they've let Bournemouth, Blackburn, and Fulham have a go at stretching ahead again. So it's a huge game. It really is. I'd be loath to say it's a must win, but for me it's a must not lose anyway. I think you've got to go there, and you've got to the performance levels have got to improve. I think if they played the way they did against Brighton for an hour or so, I think with DK in tow at the top of the pitch, then that they'd be on the right tracks. But scoring goals is just the name of the game, isn't it? And they just haven't done it enough away from home. So if they can get the first goal, and we all know that Ishmael likes to have an early goal, they haven't done that enough in recent weeks, then they might be onto something. But QPR, it'd be typical, wouldn't it, if Charlie Austin pops up with a winner or something, or Chris Willock scores and haunts them again the way he did with Huddersfield. So
yeah,
there's lots of different components to the day, really. But that would be my kind of bottom line message: would be just come back and make sure that you haven't got beat.
Yeah, I hope we don't get beat, because if we end up going below QPR, possibly I think we could potentially could we drop out the playoffs by the end of that game, or potentially drop into 6th by the end of the game. So it's certainly going to be one that Albion fans are going to be particularly nervous about, myself included. And what sort of lineup do you think that Ishmael might go for? Because obviously we've got the suspensions of Moat and Johnson. I think those particular positions will pick themselves. But where else do you think that we may see a couple of changes from Brighton, or do you think it will be pretty similar?
Well, he's obviously got a problem now at the back without Kipper. So with Ajayi and O'Shea obviously unavailable for now, who are both right-sided centre halves, he's got a bit of a decision to make there in terms of what he does with the back three. He's going to have to reshuffle. I think you could stick Darnell Furlong in the back three and play Gardner Hickman on the wing, or you could play Livermore in the back three the way he did against Reading and play Gardner Hickman in the middle. So he's got a couple of options, but could have done without that Kipper red card basically. But I think you've got a few players that know now that they can play in different positions, which is really, really handy. Players like Adam Reach.
Yeah.
If you needed him, could play on the left side of midfield. If you needed Jake to play in the back three and have Malumbi in the midfield with Reach, you could do. It's not ideal by any means, but there are kind of options there now where you kind of know that players at the very least can put a bit of a shift in. So it's not ideal. As I say, there are probably 3 or 4 players I'm not going to play on Saturday that Ishmael would consider to be in his strongest 11 for what is an enormous game. So it's not ideal, but there are 1 or 2 options. I'd personally quite like to see, not that we've had even an inkling that it's happened at any point in the season or that he would even consider it, but I would like to see Darnell Furlong in the back three. He's really good leap on him, really good spring. Aerially, he's very, very, capable. So I'd like to see him there. It would mean Taylor playing on the wing, and then it's another week of Dara O'Shea getting more minutes on the training pitch, and Kipper will be back for Peterborough as well. So it's a kind of needs must, I think, for this weekend at least.
Yeah, because we've certainly done without that Kipper red card for definite. Now we're sort of looking into it. Do you think, finally, Joe, for you, do you think that Albion can pick up 3 points, or do you think it's just a case of having your fingers crossed that we don't end up, as you said, running away being beaten?
Oh, I think I'd be positive going there. I can envisage maybe QPR play some pretty decent stuff. And if they can kind of play the game out the way they did at Coventry, which, would involve them kind of almost playing into Albion's hands, really. And QPR haven't got a great home record in recent weeks. I think Stoke have gone there and won, and Bournemouth have gone there and won. So, the better teams in this division can go and beat them on their own patch. and Albion mustn't forget that they beat them at the Hawthorns anyway earlier in the season. So I'd be positive. You know, the DK factor could be quite big. It could be quite significant in how the game pans out. So I'll go 2-1 Albion. A very kind of optimistic 2-1 Albion.
It's a very optimistic 2-1 Albion. I'll go for 1-0. I don't know if we'll score two, but I think I've got to. If DK comes off the bench, I feel like he might just score, but that's just me being wishful because I'm desperate for him to get off to the best possible start. In an Albion shirt, really. I wouldn't want to, but again, I don't want to put any pressure on him because it's a massive task coming in. But hopefully, we can expect a good game on Saturday. But Joe, it's been a massive pleasure having you on the podcast again and picking your brains about all things Albion. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been great to have you on.
Top man, Lee. Thanks very much for having me on as always.
Absolute pleasure. But a massive thank you to you for listening to the Baggies podcast this week. A massive thank you for listening. If you've not listened to us before, be sure to leave us a nice little review. Maybe subscribe to us on YouTube or your podcast provider. You can leave reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts if you're new. But a massive thank you again for listening and have a fantastic week. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.